So today I want to talk about what suffering is. All the supposed individual wants is the end of suffering. People say, no, I want truth, I want freedom, I want beauty, I want to be one with the universe, I want love. Actually, what the supposed individual wants is the end of suffering. That's it. All these beautiful intellectual teachings, all this dance of oneness and no-thing and everything, that's actually not what the supposed individual wants. It's always the end of suffering, which is happiness or beauty or love or expansion. So let's talk about what the dynamic of suffering is. Suffering is seeking. Suffering is believing that there is a separate individual, a separate seeker that can get pleasure and avoid pain. Suffering is believing that somebody can control life. All these teachings of no-thing, of everything, of Advaita, of Buddhism, of Zen Buddhism and Hinduism, all of it, at the end of the day, are just pointers, are just teachings to get out of suffering. There's no truth really in the teachings. When suffering ends, once all the questions end, once all the seeking ends, the teachings can be thrown away. There is no answer to the questions. There's just the end of the questions. Until life becomes immediate and there's no longer longing, blame, guilt, worry, anxiety, trying to avoid, until the whole dynamic of the doership falls away. No supposed separate individual ever wanted oneness, ever wanted to die or die to oneself or become liberated. They just want the end of suffering. And the seeker gets confused because the seeker is always trying to end suffering in the flow of life. Always thinking that the end of suffering is in getting pleasure and avoiding pain, is lining up life to create perfect circumstances in everything, even in spiritual seeking. For example, this morning my boyfriend and I took a really beautiful walk in King's Park, overlooking the city as the sun came up, and because it's spring, all the flowers are out, and it was divinely beautiful. The seeker believes that that is happiness. A separate individual believes that they have created happiness by going to the park, by seeing the sun come up, by all the flowers being out. What actually happiness is the seeking falling away. It's never in the situation. But this is such a clever trick, because the trick is in the obtaining of pleasure momentarily, as you get the car or the beautiful sunrise or the intellectual understanding of spirituality. Seeking falls away for a short period of time, and it appears that there's happiness. Happiness is never in the flow of life. It's who you truly are. It's covered up, it's veiled by the apparent seeker, by the apparent dynamic of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. The attention on the seeking creates the contraction, creates the belief that there is someone here doing something. And there's nobody here. And when that dynamic's seen through, that there's no seeker, there's expansion, complete expansion into what is. It's absolute love, because there's no denying of life. You can be just as happy sitting in a prison cell as, this is radical, as watching the sun come up in King's Park with your lover. It's more pleasurable to sit in King's Park with your lover, but that is not your happiness. And your happiness is not intellectual understanding. Spiritual seekers think that if they intellectually understand this, there'll be happiness, but that's another seeking. And in those moments of understanding, seeking falls away, and they believe they found it in the intellectual understanding. It's such a clever trick, but it's a trick on no one. There's no one ever here. It's just consciousness playing, or awareness, or being, or life, or God playing hide and seek. I found it, I've lost it. And it loves this dynamic of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. Creates such great, beautiful dramas. You know, you found your lover, you're so desperately in love, this is your happiness, you'll die if you lost them. Being loves that drama. And everyone, the whole of the population, is seeking happiness, their true self. Everyone. It's just that everyone believes that this supposed happiness is in different things. In business, in money, in traveling, in biking, in fishing, sports, whatever. But it's never in that. It's who you are. It's what life is. Life is completely and divinely in love with itself. It is only the idea that there is a separate individual here seeking that creates suffering, that creates avoidance of life, that creates the sensation of suffering, or the appearance of suffering. But nobody ever suffered, because life is divinely in love with itself. Even the apparent suffering. And all of this that I talk about is only ever apparently. It's all only in thought, because really there's only ever this moment, and that's just in the dynamic of thought. But there's nothing wrong with that, that's just what's coming up. is just being talked about in parent thought and parent time and space. Really, no one ever suffered. Nothing ever happened. There's just absolute stillness and silence. There's no thing. But in this apparent dream, this apparent story, there's an apparent separate individual running and searching for happiness. And life becomes absolutely effortless. Life is just happening. There's no sense here that somebody's doing something. There's no sense here that life can ever go wrong. And it's absolute in loveness, in love with nothing, in love with life because it's happening. Complete relaxation. And the apparent story still happens. But it's happening for no one. It's just happening, with the thoughts arising, the window arising, the light, the dogs. But there's no sense that anything is out of place. It's only ever the seeker which believes life is out of place, believes it needs to find its happiness. And it's taught this from such a young age. As soon as it's born, it's given a name. You're a separate individual and you've got to do things. You've got to find your happiness. Your happiness is having your toys. Your happiness is in having your milk. And it grows and grows and grows and it becomes so complicated. So many things have to be lined up to make the apparent individual happy. But honestly, nothing can make you happy. You are happiness. So the next time the thought comes up, my partner shouldn't have done this, my partner has upset me. What is upsetting you, what is upsetting the suffering is believing that your partner's upset you, believing that your partner is your happiness. It's so untrue. You are happiness. This doesn't have to happen to everybody. And I'm not saying that this is a trait or anything. But after the happiness stabilized here, or after, this will sound so courting story. Can you hear my dogs barking? They've been barking for ages. It must be a kangaroo. So what was I saying? After happiness is kind of, because in awakening there's a lot of flip-flopping in and out. And then after it stabilized here, it was seen that Lisa's lips always go upwards, even when she's crying. It's a long time for the dogs to be barking. Oh, I need to go and save a kangaroo. I have 4 dogs at the moment. So. It's not actually my dogs, it's the other dogs. It's the neighbour's dogs. Anyway, I've got to stop this to get it up to YouTube. This is part 1. There is a part 2 to seeking.